Hello everyone, my name is Philip Travis. I did my PhD at Washington State University in 2014 and I will be your instructor in this course. This is American History Part 2. And this class begins with the Reconstruction period, as you can see from the images here on the screen. And it begins with Reconstruction and runs through to the present. So I think it's going to be a very fun, engaging, and thought-provoking course. My own specialization as a historian is in American history during the 20th century, and particularly the United States and the world, international relations, military history, imperialism, and so forth. My specialization is really with the Cold War. I wrote a book about the Reagan administration's involvement in the conflicts in Central America during the 1980s, particularly the war with Nicaragua, the so-called Contra War. If anyone's heard of the Iran-Contra affair, that book came out a few years ago. I've written a number of articles related to terrorism during the Cold War, particularly as it relates to the United States and Latin America, though I have recently been writing some material that also relates to world history and also to the early 20th century United States' imperial involvement in conflicts in Central America dating back to the beginning of the 20th century, which we'll be talking a little bit about in this course. Before I talk about what to expect in this class in terms of how the class will progress and what I expect of you and so forth, let's talk a little bit about the content, just an overview. So as you can see, we're going to start with the Reconstruction period. This is the period from the end of the American Civil War. The American Civil War was a uniquely devastating conflict. In terms of, to give you an understanding, if you know anything about the First World War, the American Civil War was relative to the First World War in Europe. The American Civil War was as destructive. It was an industrial war with absolutely devastating consequences for society and certainly for those directly involved in the fighting, but also, of course, indirectly. And, of course, the images you see here really convey that as we sort of begin to think about our first week's material. So this image you see here, this is Broad Street after the war. Up here is a depiction of Richmond. And then, of course, down here, depictions of an African-American individual casting a vote, really an act that symbolizes really the real meaning of the Reconstruction period and of the Civil War, a real change in terms of citizenship, of freedom, and protections, constitutional protections for the rights of Americans. So we're going to begin with Reconstruction. We're going to look at also things like the Gilded Age, the Industrial Revolution. We're going to talk about the issue of monopolies and wealth inequality. We're going to talk about the age of progressivism, the progressive reform era. We're going to look at wars. We're going to look at international relations. We're going to look at the United States becoming a world power at the beginning of the 20th century with conflicts like the Spanish and Philippine-American War. With the development of events like the First World War. And of course, the Second World War, really launching the United States onto really the global stage as a world power. We'll certainly be looking a lot at the Cold War, the era of the Vietnam War, the cultural revolutions, if you will, of the 60s, the Civil Rights Movement, the anti-war movement, the counterculture movement. We'll be looking at the rise of the modern conservative movement as well in the 1980s, really epitomized by the presidency of Ronald Reagan. And of course, we'll be looking at the age of New Deal liberalism that was really led and championed most, at least initially, by Franklin Roosevelt, president during the 1930s and during the Second World War, who created his New Deal. But of course, that was carried through, this idea of New Deal liberalism was carried through by political figures like Harry Truman, like Lyndon Johnson, John F. Kennedy, and others. And that era of New Deal liberalism really brought many lasting reforms that Americans still to this day benefit from. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamp programs, the GI Bill of Rights, the minimum wage laws, environmental protection, were all legacies, just to name a few, from that era of New Deal liberalism, which will make up a very significant portion of this course as we move from the Reconstruction period to the present. There are discussion forums in this class. They're not necessarily every week, but there are some discussion forums. We have a collection of quizzes in this class as well, and quizzes are generally drawn from weekly lectures and readings, and those are announced at the beginning of each week, and you'll see specifically the assigned readings and everything. All quizzes and tests are timed. There are 3 tests in this class. The tests are made up of a multiple choice and a written component. The written component is by far the most substantial element of that. You will write a significant length essay on those tests, and it usually makes up for about half of the points on the whole test. So there's a strong written component both in the discussion forums and on the exams in this class. This class runs week by week, so do not expect the class to open up in entirety and then work ahead as you see fit. Instead, we treat this class on a week-by-week basis. So each week you will have assignments. Every week you will have a video like this from me. I'll talk about things going on. I'll provide a little extra points too for watching this. More information on that coming next week. But I'll provide some information in these announcements, and there will be some extra credit for you being able to go in and explain what that information was, and there'll be some bonus points out there for you with respects to that. In addition to the 3 tests, so we'll have these announcements every week. I have video lectures that I post every week, so be looking for those. There's usually going to be between 2 and 4 every week. I try to keep them between 10 and 20 minutes apiece, so please be watching the video lectures. They will really, really help you to learn the material as we move through the course. Again, there are discussion forums. They're not every week, but a number of weeks in the class. There are quizzes on a relatively weekly basis. Follow the course in modules. Follow the course week by week. I'll open the new module every weekend, usually on Sunday, so then you start on Monday, and due dates are generally on Sunday. Follow your grades in the gradebook, of course, and if you have any questions, please look at the syllabus, get started in the class this week, and as you have questions, just send me an email through your college email to my college email. Let's have a great time in this class. I think you'll find this a very fascinating course with a lot of relevance to the world that we live in today. So I think you're going to find it a fun, interesting, and exciting course. And I look forward to being your instructor in this class. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see everyone this week in the discussion forum.